let's move on to the man who's always sprinkling good luck on everyone, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was on Flagrant with Andrew Schultz and the gang. And Brian, I watched this. Did you get a chance to watch it or just the
entire
clips?
thing? And tell me about these guys. I don't watch this show.
So Sagar's friends with them actually, but they are Schultz was talking on the podcast. He's he calls himself a lifelong Democrat repeatedly in his conversations with Bernie. So I really wanted you to win in 2016. He's kind of he's similar. I would say he's sort of politically similar to Rogan, probably a little less interested in some of the wild conspiratorial stuff. He's not in as deep probably on all of those things, but it's kind of similar in that it's Bernie bro-ish. I think even talked about how the podcast bros have been labeled similarly to the Bernie bros in conversation with Bernie Sanders.
I did see that part.
This almost sexist approach to lumping people into pejorative categories.
DOJ is going to come for you pretty soon.
Yeah.
Keep doing that.
Yeah, they're going to come right for you, DEI. But anyway, it's the conversation, before we kick it over to this one fascinating clip. We have a couple of clips, but the one we're going to play first is really, really good. I just want to say the first part of their conversation, they're spending 20 minutes talking about the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the reason that's important is I don't think there are a lot of Democrats who can sit and talk totally organically. Bernie is just blowing them away with his knowledge of the 1958 lineup of the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Well, the Dodgers going to LA, I think, it was a formative experience for Bernie Sanders in a way that
he said that.
Yes, the early childhood trauma can be.
And
I think you can connect it to this sense of who are these oligarchs that can rip a community apart? And as somebody who was as passionate about baseball in my childhood as Bernie was in his, baseball feels like it is part of the community. It does not feel like it should be something owned by an individual who can do something with it.
That's why you got to go with the Green Bay Packers.
I mean, one of the greatest senses of injustice I would ever feel as a child was when the Phillies would not be on TV. So what do you mean I can't watch the Philadelphia Phillies? They're the Philadelphia Phillies. They have to be on TV.
Yeah.
This is insane.
You're outside of Philadelphia. Yeah. The reason that I wanted to start with that point is precisely because I think I'm saying this as a conservative. If you are an ideological liberal and you watch Bernie's fluent, natural, organic conversation about the Brooklyn Dodgers with Andrew Schultz for 20 minutes, he gives the best pitch for democratic socialism, all in the context of baseball. In the first 20 minutes of that podcast, that is changing hearts and minds. It is persuading people that the left is reasonable. Even if I disagree with it, you're a 18-year-old boy and you're listening to that, you're like, holy shit, this is completely true. These billionaires come in, buy up teams, jack up the ticket prices so that a family of four can't afford.
It's like a vacation now.
It's literally the price of a vacation. Yes, can't afford to go to a game without it being the price of the weekend at a beach. For everyone to get a hot dog, decent ticket, whatever.
It's a punch in the face.
Yeah. And so they come in and buy
Repeated punches in the face. First the parking.
Well, they use your money to build the stadium.
Yeah.
Then charge you $80 a ticket for a decent seat. And then they take the team somewhere else 10 years later once you've already bought your kids gear and you've sort of emotionally invested in the franchise.
Right. And then it's an $18 for a Coke.
And it's baseball. It's America's pastime. Yeah. And so the way Sanders starts that segment is just a fantastic pitch for democratic socialism. And there are so few. He is willing to laugh at their jokes about, they say something about, Bernie's like, we learned how to do arithmetic this way by watching baseball.
Yeah.
And Schultz goes, well, today we call that autism. And Bernie's laughing at it. And it's like, you don't find other Democrats. Imagine Alyssa Slotkin just being able to roll with a comedian making a joke about that. She wouldn't. And it's the same thing when Schultz makes jokes about you can only be bigoted around your close friends. Bernie Sanders is like, look, I'm against bigotry. And Schultz goes, unless it's around your close friends. And Bernie just rolls with it.
To your close friends.
Yeah, to your close friends. So let's roll this clip so that I can stop doing summaries of clips. I know everybody loves that. This is D1.
About what happened to you in 2016 with this Bernie Bros movement, where you're your followers are seeing they have a racism problem, a misogyny problem. Do you think that's a super PAC thing behind that?
That was the Democratic establishment. That was the.
Wow. Okay.
That was just, they were sitting there. We had a lot of young people. We had people of color, and they create this kind of myth with the help of the corporate media and all that stuff.
It's kind of interesting to that note is during this election, the podcast space, which the Democrats largely avoided, they feel had some influence in the election, and they started to label us the podcast bros. And said that we were sexist and we were racist and bigoted. It's almost like it's the exact same strategy to get you out of there.
Yeah, that's what the liberal elite China does. They run away. Look, again, I would hope that everybody who's watching the program is that we as a nation have got to end all forms of bigotry, right?
Yes.
That I start off as a basic assumption.
Unless it's to your close friends, right?
Yeah, whether it's racism or sexism, homophobia, or xenophobia, whatever it is. And liberal Democrats talk about that all the time. And then you get to what we call identity politics.
Yeah.
That you're black, you're wonderful, you're tremendous, you're gay, you're the greatest human being on earth.
Yeah.
And rather than say, what do you stand for?
Exactly.
You're gay, that's fine, who cares?
Yeah.
But what do you stand for?
Yeah.
Is every gay person brilliant and wonderful and great? No, of course not. Everybody's a human being.
Yeah.
So the issue is what you stand for, which gets you back to what we discussed earlier, class politics, in the sense of which side are you on? Are you going to stand with working families? Are you going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage or not? Are you going to fight to guarantee health care to all people or not? Are you going to demand that the wealthiest people start paying their fair share of taxes or not? Those are the issues. And no one cares what color you are, what your gender is, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so Ryan, well done. Again, this is what's so frustrating is Democrats, I just wrote about this morning, actually. Like they're on this quest, we can put the next tear street up on the screen, this multi-million-dollar quest to find the next Joe Rogan. The New York Times had an interesting...
D3, yeah.
Yeah, the New York Times had an interesting report on it. Sorry, yes, I skipped ahead. About how Democrats are now throwing millions of dollars. They have spreadsheets of influencers to try and create the next Joe Rogan, when obviously they lost the original Joe Rogan, who's somebody who had Bernie Sanders on, and then a big conversation with Bernie Sanders about universal health care and all of these Democratic socialist policies that Rogan is pretty interested in. And Democrats don't want to change their policy offerings or their tone, as evidenced by the fact that they're not leaning into Bernie being the guy that can help them win back the Rogan, instead of astroturfing some partisan hack that's going to be exactly the opposite of what succeeds on the podcast circuit, which is the anti-partisanship of freewheeling conversation and sort of authenticity. Bernie can go on Flagrant just like Trump can, just like J.D. Vance can, and he can go on Theo Vaughn, he can go on Joe Rogan, and it's because he's a critic of the Democratic Party in the same way that Trump is a critic of the Republican Party. You could say Bernie's more sincere than Trump, sure, but they're both criticizing their own party, which is what you're not going to pay a bunch of influencers to do. Nobody wants the Dem donors to give millions of dollars to people who are then going to go trash the Dems.
We got Ro Khanna coming pretty soon, so let's roll this last clip of D2 from here, where he talks about, are Democrats a threat to democracy as well?
The problem I think a lot of voters had is like they didn't even know if it was her. We didn't even know if Biden was president. We didn't even know if these were her talking points. And we felt that over the last 4 elections, Democrats, we felt that we didn't have a say on who could be president. We talk a lot about the Republicans being autocrats and oligarchs and taking over democracy, but from the Democrat perspective, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, I felt like the Democratic Party completely removed the democratic process from its constituents. And I think they need to have some accountability of that.
No argument here.
I donated for you. I mean, I wanted you to, like, 2016, I was like, this is going to happen. This guy's going to do it. And it felt like they stole it from me. And I'll be honest, it broke my heart when you supported them.
Look, but you have, in the world that I live in, you got a choice. And I mean, a lot of people, including my wife, agree with you. But, you know, you're down to a choice. Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or is it going to be Donald Trump? Not a great choice.
But it ended up being him anyway, so why don't we burn it down?
Well, because it's easy to say burning it down means that children are not going to have food to eat, that the schools will deteriorate, people will not have health care.
I got it.
And I'm an elected official. I got to represent the people.
That's fair.
And I can't turn my back on.
But then could we not also say, if ostensibly there hasn't been a fair primary for the Democrats since 2008, are they not also a threat to democracy? Yes. We often hear.
Fair enough. That is. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that point.
Including my wife.
That was a pretty funny line. Yeah,
That's why he can hang with the bros.
Yeah, yeah, and Jane is she is more of a burn it down than Bernie is. Yeah, that is
more of a Bernie bro than Bernie.
For sure. Bernie actually wanted somebody to primary Obama in 2012, which killed him then in 2016. They used that against him ruthlessly. And I think he would, at the time, he would have loved to take it back. He didn't have any idea that he was going to be a competitive presidential candidate in the next cycle.
Right.
So, 2012, that was fair because nobody ran against him, Obama. 2016, we know. 2020, votes were fair.
Yeah.
But the party just, consolidated around Joe Biden. Bernie was like polling ahead even among black voters after Nevada.
I mean,
but the Democratic primary voters are very lockstep. And when MSNBC, CNN, Pete Buttigieg, Obama, Amy Klobuchar, everybody consolidated, they moved.
Yeah. Well, and that's what sends
Which isn't really cheating. It's like they used the power of the party to beat him, which, yes, is hypocritical if your name is the Democratic Party.
Yeah. And it's the reason that you end up getting the Andrew Schultz of the world looking seriously at Donald Trump. And it's because they're so disillusioned by how Bernie Sanders was treated. And until Democrats acknowledge that, they're not going to have success in the anti-establishment podcast circuit. They can continue to, New York Times, The Daily, NPR, those still do really well on the podcast charts. It's something that I think Dems sort of take for granted, but they're not going to win back young men until these faults are acknowledged, and they're not going to pay their way to bullshitting people into thinking that they're sincerely acknowledging those faults. So good luck to everyone. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.